After sweeping the league MVP in the Denver Nuggets in the second round of the playoffs, the Phoenix Suns are headed to a place I could have never imagined 2 years ago, the Western Conference Finals. Somebody please pinch me. So we're going to rewind 2 years. Even after winning the lottery and taking Deandre Ayton with the first overall pick, they lost so much in 2019, it became the franchise's worst record since their inception in 1969. What made those 4 seasons so disheartening, though, was their culture, having 4 different coaches in 4 years, which all led to one thing: less than 25 wins, and a lot of Suns fans being upset. Rightfully so. Yet the building blocks the team had made it clear Phoenix was capable of so much more. They were just cycling through everything: coaches, draft picks, veterans, and a ton of losses. But if they had the right executive, the guy in charge who could put the pieces they had together, this Suns team could have avoided all of that hardship. Before those 4 embarrassing seasons, the Suns nearly made the postseason in 2014 and 2015, which led to GM Ryan McDonough using their late lottery selections on TJ Warren in 2014 and Devin Booker in 2015. Those selections loaded Phoenix with a plethora of young talented wing players, and on top of that, presented them a big man getting David Robinson comparisons. But for GM Ryan McDonough, basically everything else he did was questionable. He made some really solid selections which set the Suns team up very well for the future, but for every good pick he made one disastrous one. He didn't get along with many of the Suns' best players, as well as some questionable trades and not being able to find the right head coach. And just days before the 2019 season began, Ryan Sarver fired him, which surprised basically every basketball fan. Not because the firing wasn't warranted, but the timing of it just didn't make much sense. Phoenix would replace him with former Suns player and vice president of basketball operations, James Jones. This was a new era for the Phoenix Suns, one most Suns fans are delighted to look back on. But in 2019, he would share GM responsibilities with a co-pilot in Trevor Bookstein. Not long after, they traded McDonough's biggest offseason signings in 2019 in Trevor Ariza and Ryan Anderson for Kelly Oubre, other role players, and cash. And after they won just 19 games, they fired Igor Kokoskov, and just a week later hired Monty Williams, the coach from those early Anthony Davis Pelican teams, who most recently was an assistant coach for the 76ers. But what made many excited was that this guy could communicate well with his players and could easily command the respect of any locker room. They were even tied for having the best odds at getting the first pick yet again, so things really did seem like they were going upward. Then on the lottery night, they fell to 6, easily missing out on the big 3 of Zion, RJ Barrett, and Ja Morant. So on draft night, they selected Jae Crowder, a player oozing with potential on both ends of the floor, to add even more around Devin Booker on the wings. But shortly after, they traded him to Minnesota in a trade that made many people upset. In return, they got Dario Saric, who had been up and down his one and only year in Minnesota, and a 23-year-old sharpshooter from UNC, Cameron Johnson. So they traded TJ Warren, coming off a career year, and then former top 5 pick Josh Jackson for nothing more than cash and some roster fillers. They used that to address their point guard need by signing Ricky Rubio to a 3-year, $51 million deal before re-signing Kelly Oubre. After that, they rolled into the fall of 2019 with a much different team surrounding Devin Booker and Deandre Ayton. And even after Deandre Ayton was suspended after the first game of the year for 25 games, the Suns started off surprisingly pretty solid, 11-12, which isn't a great record, but when considering they were without their second best player, was pretty impressive. But by the time Ayton returned, Phoenix's hot shooting, which propelled them into being an average team, quickly fell off, and not long after, the same could be said about their record. The big news, though, was when the season returned from suspension. The Suns were invited to the NBA bubble with a chance of making the postseason. James Jones would sign Cameron Payne after some time in China to fill out the roster. The Suns would win game after game against 7 playoff teams, and were the only team to go undefeated in the bubble, even without Kelly Oubre, who was out after getting surgery before the season stopped. Devin Booker is playing out of his mind, Cameron Payne looked good for the first time in his career, and the chemistry being built in Phoenix was clear. Monty Williams was the leader that this team needed. And even though the team fell short of a spot in the play-in game, the Suns were one of the most successful teams to come out of the NBA bubble, holding their heads high, knowing that next season in 2021 could be their year if they made the right decisions. And man, did they make the right decision. Chris Paul is a veteran this team needed to finally get out of the lottery. Not long after, the Suns would sign Jae Crowder and would round out the rotation by re-signing between some other guys than the year before. Since that point, the Phoenix Suns have not looked back, coasting through the regular season with some pretty good injury luck, but generally speaking, incredible chemistry. And as Chris Paul continued to stay healthy, this Suns team looked more and more mature as the year went on. Mikal Bridges would elevate into a terrific two-way wing who honestly should have been on the all-defensive team this year. And with other guys like Jae Crowder and Torrey Craig coming into Phoenix, it made things way easier for Devin Booker because the guys around him were good defenders for the first time in D-Book's career. Hence, this season, when it's mattered most, Devin Booker's defense has been better than it was ever before. And it wasn't just their starting five, because Dario Saric, Cam Payne, and Cameron Johnson off of the bench were clutch for Phoenix throughout the season. When guys went down or in foul trouble, the Suns could rely on them to be the fifth guy in the starting lineup, and they held things down tightly. And when looking at the Suns team now, it makes me look back to 2 years ago when James Jones stepped in. Because before the Suns were sweeping the Denver Nuggets, this team was best known for dysfunction and a narrative of empty stats. And with them finding themselves here, I'm here to tell you, James Jones is a reason why this all changed. But when looking at the beginning of the James Jones timeline, one of the first moves he made was firing the former coach and hiring Monty Williams, a pivotal point where the clock was ticking to give Devin Booker the right head coach as soon as possible. And the stability Monty Williams created last season for Phoenix made them a destination for Chris Paul to want to go to. Hiring that coach led to a ripple effect of building the culture they badly needed, and what that created is a place that many veterans want to go to, even if the team is young. Truth be told, the guy making the decisions, James Jones, is the one most responsible for the Suns' sudden turnaround. Without him, the Phoenix Suns would be in a situation eerily similar to the way it looked just a few years ago. But with him, the Phoenix Suns have exactly what they needed most. A guy who could put the pieces of the puzzle together and create a contender in the NBA. Praise head coach Monty Williams and every player that's led them to where they are right now, but without James Jones leading the way, none of that would be possible.